lot of times people don't know about us. Some kind of traumatic medical event like a heart attack where they get medevaced to whatever hospital they need to.
Community 500-600 kilometers away, and it's tough for me to get to that station.
We have connections with a lot of the major hospitals all across the country.
Human face on some of these missions. Tell me some of your favorite stories.
They're flying over Manitoulin Island. His mom goes, "Hey, Harlan, look, that's our house. Do you see our trampoline?"
If I'm a pilot, I have my own plane, I have some time. How do I get involved? How do I help?
You really just remove the difficulty for the patients. You provide a friendly face, and it's just, like I said, it's the heart of the organization.
And we're back on the Open Skies podcast. I am with Kristina De Marzio, and it's amazing that I got that name right.
Yeah.
Because I've been practicing for about 5 minutes to make sure I did. You are the manager of community engagement.
That's it.
So tell me about that role.
Yeah, so I wear a lot of different hats at Hope Air. I work with a lot of our patient stories, our referral network, which is like social workers and hospitals and nurses and that kind of thing, just to spread more word about Hope Air. I dabble in a little bit of government advocacy, depending on which province we're in. But I think the one you're probably most interested in is our volunteer pilot program. So I manage the recruitment and just all of our communications with our volunteer pilots.
Excellent. So all of the pilots that are listening right now, this one is going to hit you pretty hard because we're coming for you to be a part of this program. One of the things that we were talking about before we started rolling was the involvement of the hospital. So when somebody is going to use Hope Air, what's the first touch point in most cases?
Yeah, so a lot of times people don't know about us. And so what usually happens is either they've experienced some kind of traumatic medical event, like a heart attack, where they get medevaced to whatever hospital they need to, or their doctor will refer them to another hospital in another city. And so now either they travel by themselves or the referring doctor will share information about Hope Air.
Right.
If they do have to travel by themselves, we have connections with a lot of the major hospitals all across the country. And so whether it's the social worker or the nurses, they'll just go and say, "Hey, I recognize you live 700 kilometers from here.
Right.
Do you know about Hope Air? Or how are you traveling back and forth?" Or there's even patients that will say, "Well, if I have to come back every 2 or 3 weeks or every month, I just can't afford it." So then that's kind of where nurses or social workers will share information about Hope Air, give them a pamphlet or whatever, and then they can just contact us directly.
So logistically, right, there's got to be some stories where it just doesn't line up city pair wise, right? Like I'm in a community 500-600 kilometers away, and it's tough for me to get to that station because there's no available air travel. So walk me through that process. Walk me through those stories.
Yeah, so we have a lot of them all across the country because there's a lot of communities that are not serviced or serviced regularly by commercial airlines. So that's kind of where our volunteer pilot program comes in.
Right.
So one route specifically is, let's say, Cranbrook to Kelowna. It's about a 4-hour drive, but if somebody can't drive, they don't have a car, they just can't drive medically, and they have to fly. In order to fly commercially, from Cranbrook, you either have to travel to Calgary or Vancouver, lay over, and then fly to Kelowna. So what would be a 4-hour drive now turns into an 8-hour flying day.
Right.
So with our volunteer pilots, they can just fly right into the regional airport of Cranbrook, fly you right into Kelowna. You don't have to worry about layovers or anything. So it benefits the patients. It makes it just so much easier for them.
100%. So let's talk about the volunteer pilot program.
Yeah.
Because I think when I started learning about Hope Air and I started doing research, this was part of the coolest thing that I saw. So talk to me about the volunteer pilot program and what's it all about.
Yeah, and I might be biased, but I think the volunteer pilot program is the heart of the organization because oftentimes, and our commercial airline partners are fantastic, but oftentimes when patients are traveling, they don't meet anybody from Hope Air. And so it's usually our volunteer pilots that will go and meet them right at the airport, pick them up, and be that direct Hope Air contact to get them where they need to be. And so I guess no matter where they are, whether it's, our pilots will fly into a commercial airport or even small regional airport strips, because sometimes patients live 3 or 4 or 6 hours away from a commercial airport, but they have a regional airport.
Yeah.
So they can fly right into those smaller communities, pick up the patients, meet them, give them the whole rundown and make sure that they're comfortable before they get on the plane, and then fly them to where they need to be.
And to be clear, these are pilots who have their own aircraft and are volunteering their own time and their own metal, their own machine to get people back and forth.
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of times our pilots aren't all retired either. Some of them are still working, and they'll just, sneak Hope Air missions in when they can. But, we have a bit mix of both.
Wow, just padding the logbook with a couple extra hours.
Exactly. Exactly. It makes it for a more fun mission than a $100 burner.
So how many volunteer pilots do you have? Roughly. You don't have to give me exact numbers, but just a rough estimate.
Yeah, currently I think we have 41 or 42 pilots across the country.
And is it balanced east-west or north-south?
Yeah, we have a lot more pilots in Ontario, for sure. We have a lot of pilots in BC, and we're just growing the program in Saskatchewan and Alberta right now.
Excellent. Okay, so if I'm a pilot, I have my own plane, I have some time, how do I get involved? How do I help?
Yeah, so on our website, under the FAQ section of our volunteer pilot program, you have to have minimum requirements of hours. So just like pick hours, total hours on your current aircraft, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that it aligns with our insurance. But on our website, there's the application form. It's just, you just tell us what your hours are. And then after that, if you do meet our minimums, then there's a full application process, just to make sure that, you meet our insurance requirements and that everything is okay before we bring you on. And our pilots also need a vulnerable sector check because they are dealing with our patients.
And then there's a board that looks at that pilot and approves it?
Oh, yeah. So we have our pilot review committee, which is actually made up of some of our volunteer pilots and some of our retired volunteer pilots. But they have all walks of life. So we have some commercial pilots that are on that committee, some pilots that had their experience in the Army, and some private pilots. So it kind of makes up a wide array of knowledge,
right?
Just so that we know we can bring in the right people and the right experience.
See, one of the things we've always tried to do with this podcast is show kind of a hidden side of aviation, and I don't think gets more hidden than this, because most people don't know this exists.
Yeah.
Tell me the impact of what a volunteer pilot can do for a northern community that maybe doesn't have the air travel, or even communities that are just not close to the hospitals they need to be in. What kind of impact can they make?
Yeah. So, for example, a community like Sioux Lookout, I don't know if you know where that is. It's like 4 hours.
Found out today.
Yeah, it's like 4 hours north of Thunder Bay. So they have a regional airstrip, but very few commercial flights.
Yeah.
So a community like that, our volunteer pilots, which we do have a couple up there, but they'll fly into communities like Red Lake or Sioux Lookout and pick up patients and bring them either to Thunder Bay for, the closest hospital, or into Toronto if they need. Well, I guess not into Toronto because that might be a bit far, but, or even communities like Timmins, they don't have a direct flight to Ottawa. You'd have to come into Toronto and then lay over and go to Ottawa. So you really just remove the difficulty for the patients. You provide a friendly face, and it's just, like I said, it's the heart of the organization. You just have this like kind, friendly person who just kind of holds your hand from the airport and brings you to where you need to be. I know sometimes if people have never been into Toronto city center, especially at Billy Bishop, they have no idea where they're going. They're like, I'm on an island. How do I get to land? So some of our volunteer pilots will just will walk them over or take the ferry over with them to say like, okay, this is where you pick up your Uber and this is where you can go, and kind of just show them that way. So
wow, take them from the aircraft all the way to the hospital. That's so crazy.
Yeah.
So you said you wear many hats. So you have the pilot program. What else are you doing here?
Yeah, so I do a lot of patient stories. And so anytime you see a patient story, whether it's on our website or on our social media, they have spoken to me, which is great. I love it. It's a great part of my job, and it just allows me to talk with all of our patients and really get get all of their stories. I love it.
Right. So if let's put a human face on some of these missions. Tell me some of your favorite stories.
Yeah. So let's think. A good mission, I guess recently, I just mentioned Timmins.
By the way, I love the word mission. Mark said it, John said it. Everybody talks about missions, not patients, but like the mission of getting them there.
Exactly.
It's a very noble way of speaking.
Yeah, and that's what we've called it forever. But yeah, it is a great word. But yeah, so the route from Timmins to Ottawa is a very frequent route for Timmins patients because they have partnerships with the Ottawa Hospital.
Right.
But there's a little girl named Sienna that we actually will be sharing her story soon. But I think she was less than a year old, and she started developing a rashes all over her body. Her parents were like, I don't understand what's going on. Brought her to the doctor.
Right.
The doctor was like, oh, it's just the flu. This is a symptom of the flu. And the parents were like, okay, well, that's great, but we don't think that that's it. So they went and got a second referral, a second opinion. And that doctor was like, actually, I believe that this is something bigger than that. So she ended up getting medevaced to the Ottawa Hospital, where they did a bunch of testing and they found out she had a really rare, I'm going to say cancer adjacent disease. And I hope I get this right because it's off the top of my head, but I think it's called Langerhans histiocytosis, I believe. And don't get me if I didn't get that right, but
I wouldn't be correcting you if you didn't.
yes. The way that disease works is that it looks exactly like cancer, but it's not cancer. So, and it's treated exactly like cancer. So this little girl, less than a year old, now has to travel from Timmins to Ottawa for chemo treatments for 12 weeks. And so, parents are now trying to figure out what's going on. Her mom is on mat leave, is not working. Dad had to take some time off. He's now on EI, and they couldn't afford to go back and forth. Luckily, the hospital told them about Hope Air. And so they were flying with Hope Air for a while, doing the Timmins to Toronto, Toronto to Ottawa route because the social worker didn't know about the volunteer pilot program. And so until I spoke with them, shared information about the volunteer pilot program and said, this could be so much easier for you. Why are you not flying with them? And so now they're able to fly Timmins to Ottawa directly with that volunteer pilot program. And so she can finish her chemo and hopefully soon she doesn't have to do it anymore.
Great. And Sienna's battling well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she's doing great. She's the happiest little baby, like just the cutest little munchkin.
Now, you were telling me about a story about a little boy named Harlan.
Yeah.
Can you tell me that story? Because I think it hits the real need for that volunteer pilot program.
Yeah, absolutely. So Harlan lives on Manitoulin Island in Gore Bay. And so this was their first time ever flying on a Hope Air mission, first trip with Hope Air ever. And our volunteer pilot flew right into Gore Bay, met them. Actually, when the pilot arrived, because I can't remember exactly what the disease that Harlan has, but he was on a feeding tube, so he had to, do his feed at the airport. Pilot picked them up, showed them their way, took off on their way to Toronto City Center. And as they're flying over Manitoulin Island, his mom goes, "Hey, Harlan, like, look." And he's kind of looking out the window. She goes, "That's our house. Do you see our trampoline?" And they were all freaking out in the back. Like, it was so cool because they had never flown over their house before. And what an experience for, I think he was around 6 or 7-year-old child to, be able to not only be in a private plane to start with, but to see their house from, so many thousands of feet in the sky.
Right. And when you're traveling and under those circumstances, it's not a great time to travel. So a story like that is pretty heartwarming because I'm sure Harlan kind of forgot he was a sick kid for a moment while he's being flown around by a private pilot.
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of our patients too, oftentimes either you're flying down from diagnosis or flying home from surgery or you're going back and forth for treatment. It's not fun. You're in the midst of a medical journey.
Travel isn't fun at the best of times.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So at least, with a smiling face with our volunteer pilots and having the experience of being on a small aircraft, 4 to 6 seats, like how many times can you really get that experience in your lifetime? So it's really cool for our patient.
Now, how is this all coordinated, right? So if you have 40, 41, 42 pilots across the country, do you have a control center? Do you have operations? What does that look like?
Yeah, so
How does that work?
our client care team, that I'm pretty sure somebody must have mentioned it before, but our client care team, what they do is they act like travel agents. So a patient will put in their application, whether it's online or over the phone, and our team will go and book all of their arrangements for them. And so if somebody is identified that they want to fly with our volunteer pilot program, then our client care team will, try to figure out if there's a volunteer available. If so, then we'll put them on one of those. But either that or they'll look and say, okay, well, this is a really horrible route like Timmins to Ottawa or Cranbrook to Kelowna in BC, and maybe they would benefit from a volunteer pilot flight. So they'll ask, hey, are you comfortable flying in a smaller aircraft? Is this, do you require oxygen? Because there's a couple of things that are requirements for our patients, and then they'll book them that way.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's such a, like I said, a hidden form of aviation that people just haven't really thought of, and you don't think of it until you unfortunately are in that situation, right?
Yeah.
You know, medical needs don't care about the economic viability of a route.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Timmins to Ottawa probably doesn't have 737s or Dreamliners on it because the demand isn't there, but the medical need is.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's so many times too where there's people that get medevaced down because they've had some kind of traumatic medical event, whether it's a heart attack or whatever, and then they get stranded at the hospital wherever they get dropped off at it, whether it's Toronto or Vancouver, because medevac doesn't bring you home.
No.
So that's also part of our program too, and even with our volunteer pilot program, is that we'll help bring people home because when you're having a heart attack, you're not thinking, "Hey, can you grab my ID?" Well, as we're leaving, and people are left without their wallets, without their ID, and either they have to sit and wait in Toronto for it to get mailed down,
Yeah.
or they take one of our volunteer pilot flights where you don't it's great if you have it, but you're not crossing any borders, so you don't really need it, right?
Yeah, when you think of the logistics behind those medevacs, like in Alberta, it's Stars, right? I believe it's called Orange here.
Yep. Yeah.
But I know in Stars, a helicopter picks you up, flies you to a hospital, and then what?
Yeah,
and
they wait.
And Hope Air is there to fill in the then what.
Exactly.
And what a great mission.
Yeah, exactly.
So going into 2025, what are your needs? What are you looking to accomplish in your role?
Yeah, so the program is growing. We're actually looking to grow the program in Alberta and Saskatchewan, as well as Northern Ontario, so anywhere like Sault Ste. Marie and more north, as well as Northern BC, because there's a lot of communities up in those areas that we just aren't able to support with our volunteer pilots, either because it's too far or there's just nobody there, right? So that's kind of where our recruitment is opening up. Recruitment will be open come, let's say, March or April, because we have to do our renewals first with our current volunteer pilots. But as soon as that's open, we would welcome all applications so long as you meet our minimum requirements, which are on our website.
Right.
But yeah, we're just looking to grow the program there.
Is there a specific aircraft type or size, like, do you prefer, or is it all shapes and sizes?
All shapes and sizes. The typical aircraft that we have in our programs is 4 to 6 seats.
Okay.
We've had Cessnas, Pipers, Diamonds. I think there's Bonanza has been in our program. Like, there's a bit of anything and everything. We just need pilots in their aircraft.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, Kristina, this has been just an absolutely fantastic day, spending some time with Hope Air. I'm going to give you the last word before I sign off. So what would you like our listeners to know?
Yeah, Hope Air is such a great cause, and we do such incredible work all across the country. And whether you're able to donate funds or donate knowledge or donate your aircraft or even just spread the word about Hope Air, we appreciate all of it. And yeah, it's a great cause. So.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to open your doors to us today and let us be a part of the Hope Air family today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having us.
And thank you for listening at the Open Skies podcast. Today has been very touching to me, and I'm extremely proud to be associated with Hope Air and to bring you these 2 episodes. So thank you so much for spending some time with us, and thank you to Hope Air for having us.
Thanks.
Excellent.